Well, thank you, everybody. We're so excited to see you for our talk this morning on backyard chickens. You are in for a real treat. She's very exciting. I'm going to throw in all my chicken puns that I can. Ann Wortinger is a faculty member of the vet tech program. She's been here pretty much since the beginning. She's one of our OG faculty members. She's also a triple threat. She's triple boarded with 3 different VTSs, which are veterinary technician specialty certifications, which are extremely hard to get. And she is just an incredible wealth of knowledge. So I'm very excited to hear her talk today. As Mary Beth said, as you were filtering in, we don't have a chat option, but we do have a Q&A option that I will be monitoring. So if you've got questions, I'm sure we'll have plenty of time at the end to answer any questions. So please feel free to type them in the Q&A box. And with that, I'm going on mute and I'm turning off my camera and I'm handing it over to Anne.
Thank you so much, Jen. So not only am I going to be talking about backyard chickens, I have been a chicken parent for 20 years now. So if it can go wrong, it's usually gone wrong at my house. If it's a predator, it's visited my yard. So we're going to talk about some of the things that I've learned, some of the things that make it important. One of the things that our exotics teachers or atypical pet teachers will tell you is that husbandry or housing and feeding are 2 of the most important things that we need to address with our atypical pets. So anything other than cats and dogs. There we go. So why should you get chickens? Well, you get fresh eggs. They can also be used for meat. They provide copious amounts of fertilizer. They are very effective at bug control, and that is actually the initial reason that I got them, because we have ticks on our property. Entertainment, which is the reason my husband tolerates them, and companionship. There are people that have indoor chickens, and they can be very engaging and very entertaining. So domestic chickens are Gallus domesticus, and they were domesticated from the red jungle fowl in Southeast Asia. They have been associated with humans for over 5,000 years, so probably not quite as long as cats and dogs. They hit Europe about 2,500 years ago along the Silk Road, and they landed in America on the Mayflower. I'm unsure if Columbus brought any chickens with him, but that would have predated the Mayflower. So there are different, just like with dogs and cats, horses, cows, anything, there's different types. So we have our game or our fighting chickens, and those are what they were originally bred for, was entertainment. We have our meat producers. We have production, which is usually eggs. You can get dual purpose, which they are used for meat and eggs, which means they don't perform as well as either, but can be used for both. They are fancies, and we'll see what those are. And they come in 2 different sizes: standard, which is your regular size chicken, and then bantams, which are 1/2 to 1/4 size. So the image that you have is my little Japanese Chin, and she is one of the smallest breeds of chickens, and she was our mommy bird. So you will usually see her with chicks, and she raised, at the time that I had her, so she's been gone probably 10 years now, she raised every bird in the coop, and she was the littlest bird, and she ran the show. So for game birds, we have the Shamu, the Malay, and the English modern game. These tend to be very upright birds because they fight using their feet. And you will notice that they have very prominent eyebrows, very small combs, and very small wattles. The less you have to grab onto, the better off you fight. Our meat birds tend to be very large and heavy. So these are bred for size and fast growth. The chickens that you have in the market are only about 16 to 20 weeks old. That is market age for most chickens. For these birds, egg production is not as important because you don't grow meat and make eggs at the same time. Dorkings, Faverells, and Jersey Giants are examples of meat birds, and this is one of my Faverells. Now, production are birds that concentrate on making eggs. So kind of think of them like the dairy cattle of the chicken world. So these are bred for high production, and high production in a chicken is about 5 to 6 eggs a week. They don't lay every day, but most days. These are our Leghorns, our Rhode Islands, and our Orpingtons. And they can be white, brown, green, pink, all sorts of different colors. So our dual purpose, they produce meat, just not as much meat as the meat birds. And they lay eggs, just not as much eggs as the egg birds. These are typically more smaller hobby farms. And these can include Amarok, Langshorns, and Summeltars. So breeds you're probably not real familiar with. So the black and white bird is a Wyandotte. The black one is a Australorp, and then this is a Rhode Island red, the rooster. So fancies. We have lots of birds that don't make a lot of meat or lay many eggs. They're just pretty. And these can include the Brahma. So the little bird, the little tan bird in the corner is a Brahma. And if you look real close, you see she's got feathered feet. Cochins, Turkins, and the black and white bird is a Polish. And those are the ones that had the very fancy head caps on them. More fancy chickens. So the one with the naked neck is a Turkin. The one in the middle is a Frizzle. And then the one on the far left is a Silky. Now these birds, if they're roosters, they're not good for protection. They're not good for anything other than just looking at for the most part, which is fine if that's what you want. Now, there are other birds that you can keep in the backyard that are not chickens, but they're still fowl. So we've got 2 of my geese, and they were probably close to 20-pound birds. We had originally got them for protection for the chickens until they started beating up the chickens. And then you can see the guinea fowl. This is 2 hens and a rooster that are with my chickens in their pen. So they do pretty good at announcing that there's a problem. The only concern is the sky may be a problem, the truck down the road may be a problem, and they will alert for any number of things. So standard size versus bantam. I typically will have a mixed flock. Right now, all I have is standard size, but the black and white bird is a standard, and the little Brahma is a bantam, as is my little chin. This rooster is also a bantam, and he's half the size of the big birds. Whether you have bantams or standards is up to you. One of my reasons I like bantams, I can have more birds. So I can have twice as many birds if I get a bantam. So the standard size are our regular size chickens. The adult weighs about 6 to 8 pounds. They look a lot bigger. They're kind of like your long-haired dogs and cats, where you don't know how big the animal underneath all the fur is. They are classified as American breeds, Asiatic, English, Mediterranean, continental, and then there's some others. So a bantam size can be 1/5 to 1/4 the size of the standard breed. Some are miniature versions of a standard breed, and some are only as seen as a bantam and have no standards. They are classified as game or not by their comb style and whether or not they have leg featherings. We had talked about the bantam Brahma that had leg featherings. One of the common, I think, probably misconceptions with feather-legged chickens is that they dig less. I can tell you in my experience, I have not seen that. If you can't tolerate your chickens digging things up, and they do, they make wallow holes, they dig under bushes, they'll dig in the middle of the yard. If you can't tolerate that, then you're going to have a hard time with having chickens in an area. So we have lots and lots of different kinds of comb styles. So the big white bird here has got a single comb. That's a standard. Roosters are going to have a bigger comb than the hens for the most part. This lady down here is a single combed hen. We can get rose combs, cushion combs, pea combs, walnut, strawberry, buttercup, and even a V comb. And it really just depends on the breed and what they have selected for. Eggs. One of the main reasons that people want chickens is because of the eggs. And what we heard a lot with the egg shortages that we had earlier the past year is that we had eggs for free. That's not exactly true. We have a $3,500 fence that goes around our chicken yard. We have $1,000 coops. We pay $70 a month in chicken feed for our free eggs. So even though you get eggs out of the bargain, and we freely give our eggs away. So if you live up in near Detroit, let me know. But they are not free. And you still have the responsibility of caring for that bird. They are not carefree pets. So shell color does not reflect the nutrition inside. You can think of shell color like skin color. We're all the same under the skin, no matter what color your skin is. The color is on the outside layer only, and it is breed dependent. They will usually not change colors through their lifespan. There are some breeds of chicken that will have darker eggs or may have spotted eggs, and that can vary a little bit, but the color is not going to vary. The nutritional value of the egg is determined by the hen's diet. So you will see that some advertise that they have increased omega-3s in the eggs, and that's because they're feeding the chickens a higher omega-3 food. Yolk color is determined by what the hens are eating. So during the summertime, when mine are eating grass and flowers and bugs and worms and everything, they will tend to have yellower yolks. In the wintertime, when those things are not readily available and they're eating primarily pellets, then they will have paler yolks. That just means that the pigments that are found in the other foods are just not available. It does not affect the nutritional content of that egg. So housing. One of the things with having at least outdoor chickens is you do have to provide them housing. You need to protect them from the elements. So in my area, we get all 4 seasons. My chickens really, really hate snow. So if there's snow on the ground or in their pen, they will not come out of the coop. So we have a tarp over the top. They have metal roofing so that they have areas where they can easily get to and not have to go out into the snow. You want to protect them from predators. In my area, we have lots and lots of raccoons. We have coyotes and we have foxes. Those are all predators, as well as stray dogs or owned dogs that are visiting the yard are all predators of chickens. And we want to make sure that we're providing them adequate space. So how much room you have and whether you're going to create a stressful environment for those birds is dependent on how much space you are providing. So this is the latest iteration of my pen and coop. One of the problems with my pen is I'm only 5'2". So I only made it tall enough for me to comfortably go in there. My husband has a little bit more problems going into the pen just because it is a little lower. But this is a Rubbermaid shed. This is a solar collector. So they have a metal solar powered door that closes at night so that I'm not responsible for ensuring they're protected overnight and remembering to put everybody in. My pen is probably 17 feet by 30 feet. So there's a lot of outdoor space for them if for some reason they are not allowed out in the yard. So this is the inside. This was the inside when I had rabbits. So my rabbits also had a hutch. You can house rabbits and chickens together. The chickens are up high, the rabbits are down low. And from my chickens' point of view, the rabbits were great because they would make paths in the snow because they thought it was fun and go running around so that the chickens could go out easily. So this is my Rubbermaid shed. This is my Menards shed with nesting boxes made out of kitty litter buckets. So reuse, reduce, recycle. I also use straw and shredded paper for bedding. Both of these are easily recycled in my gardens. So I use what's called the deep litter method. And I only clean the coops out 2 to 3 times a year. And you just keep piling paper and straw on top to keep the coop clean. Now, this was a converted playhouse. It looked really cute. It did not function well. To do anything with it, you had to crawl around inside. Not a good thing to do when you're over 60. So this was quickly converted back into a playhouse, and my chickens got the Menards shed, and it is the same size as the Rubbermaid shed. It's just got a different orientation. And I also put in windows. So these are just standard shed windows so they could get cross ventilation in the coop. Ventilation for chickens is very important. So when we start talking about security, how are you going to prevent a predator from accessing these birds, especially at night or during the day when they're out in the yard? My solution, after many, many iterations, is the solar powered metal. It's called Pull It Shut, P-U-L-L-E-T, which is a young hen. Pull It Shut doors. And because they're solar powered, if I lose power, I'm in a pretty rural area, losing power is not unheard of, they will close. And I don't have to remember to go out and close the coop up and open the coop up every day, which, just like with most college instructors, I'm easily distracted. So these are a couple of the different kinds of security doors I've had. So this is just a standard pet door. Worked well, but it required Anne to remember to go out, open it, and close it. Not always the best method to have me remember to do things. This is using a drapery motor to pull this door up and down. When it worked great. The only problem is it only worked for about 18 months, and then it would either stick up or stick down or burn out, any number of things. This is the Pull It Shut door. There is, you can see that little red dot there. You've got a magnetic override, so you can open or close it outside of this when the solar switch is being triggered. And this works really well for the birds. It gives them a warning closure. And then about 10 minutes later, it closes for the night. So they catch on pretty quick that, ooh, after it closed the first time and opened back up, I need to get in. This time of year, the birds are pretty willing to go in the coop as soon as it starts getting dark. So we talked about space requirements. How do you decide how many birds you can have? And it isn't necessarily based on how many birds you want. So if you've got a standard size adult birds, they need 4 square feet each. So I currently have 10 birds. So I need 40 square feet each. Now this is based on not having separate coop and pen requirements. So they need 40 square feet each, or 40 square feet for the entire group of chickens. It can be all 40 square feet in a coop or out in the pen, or a combination thereof. Both of my coops, so I have 2 coops, are 40 square feet each. So I can have up to 20 birds. If you have bantams, they only need 2 square feet each. So instead of 20 birds, I could have up to 40. 40 birds is a lot to manage if you're trying to do other things with your life. So that's one of the things I think clients don't think about often, is how big of a space I need. A lot of the commercial coops, they look very cute and they're very kitschy, and they don't provide enough space for the birds. So just because it looks like a really cute little cottage doesn't mean it's appropriate for what you need for space with these birds. Now, base material, chickens poop a lot. And you have to have something that's going to manage that, because you don't want to have their feet getting all dirty or being in the poop all the time. So you want something that's inexpensive, relatively easy to get, easy to maintain, and safe for the birds. So I started out with shredded paper when I was working on a in-ground school. There was shredded paper everywhere, and I would just take bags of the shredded paper home. It's a little harder to come by when it's just me and what I'm shredding at home. So we also have straw that we mix in. The birds tend to prefer the shredded paper in the nesting boxes. You can also see this is corn cobs, ground corn cobs. That can work very nice. Some people will use the newspaper pellets. Some people will use sand. You want something that's cheap and easily accessible, because you're going to go through it. Now, there are any number of predators that like chickens as much or more than we do. Dogs, just because they're domesticated, does not mean they are not going to try to get the chickens. I've had neighbors' dogs kill my chickens in my yard. I've had neighbor dogs that run along the fence line and worry the chickens when they can't get at them. It's really frustrating to come home and find just paw prints all along the outside of my pen, harassing my chickens. Raccoons are very persistent in trying to get at the birds. We have a large number of hawks in our area, as well as foxes, and coyotes have arrived recently. About 3 years ago, I lost half my flock to repeated coyote attacks. And since that time, my birds have a chicken yard instead of having free range. It was so devastating to me to lose so many birds. I am still not comfortable letting the birds out. So they have a half-acre chicken yard. Possums and skunks usually are more after the food or the eggs than they are the adult birds. And yes, these are my 2 little bunnies that are living with the chickens. So there are any number of things that you can do to try to protect the birds. And I can tell you that no matter what you do, the predators are spending 4 times as much time trying to figure out how to get around it. So one of the first things we did was put, this is plastic chicken wire over the pen so that we can protect them from aerial predators. The hawks used to sit on the peak of my garage up here and just kind of look down in the pen like they're shopping. That really disconcerted me. I didn't like that idea. And then this is a predator fence, which is basically a cat fence that's turned out so nothing can get in. It's 6 feet tall None of my birds have managed to escape yet. And it definitely keeps out the foxes and the coyotes. It, however, does not keep out the raccoons. Raccoons will dive bomb in from trees. They will climb over my garage to get in. Typically, they are only active at night. So if I have the birds indoor and protected, all they can get at is the food. And we try very, very hard to keep them away from that. So I had mentioned that ventilation is exceptionally important for birds. Birds have different lung setups than what mammals have. That they have air sacs instead of lungs, and they are spread throughout their body. And this can affect their respiratory health. That if they're housed primarily inside, the stool that is produced by chickens has a very high ammonia content in it because they do not have a separate bladder. And that ammonia is very irritating to the lungs. So we want to make sure that we get adequate ventilation in the coops and that the coops are clean. When we start looking at respiratory rate, chickens can have an exceptionally high respiratory rate. They do dissipate some heat like dogs do through panting, but that typically, I only see that when it starts getting up over 95, 100 degrees. Their normal body temperature is 107 degrees. So typically, if you are housing a group of chickens in a coop in the wintertime, supplemental heat is not required because they produce enough body heat. If the coop is insulated itself, which all of the plastic coops are, they're a double wall. Sometimes I will put supplemental heat in, and that's probably more for my benefit than for theirs. A big concern with any supplemental heat is fire. I did have a friend with chickens that lost the coop and more than half of her birds to an electrical fire during the wintertime. So ventilation options. Well, easy stuff is always the best. So both of my sheds have windows put in for cross ventilation. This was not a factory feature for the sheds. You do have to have some skill with some reciprocating saws, jigsaws to be able to put these in, but they're not entirely difficult. And we also have a fan so that we've got some air circulation going around. And one of my sons had told me early on that the chickens had a better setup than he did. So what are you going to feed them? And just like with dogs and cats, there are lots and lots of different views on what and how to feed a chicken. Now, if you'll remember back to the very first slide, one of my VTSs is in nutrition. So I have some very strong views on how to feed our pets. Now, your options are commercial feed, homemade, or free range and forage. So this Favorelle, she just digging around looking for bugs. She is actually digging around underneath my compost bin. So her chances of bug finding is pretty good. Now chicks, because they grow very quickly, remember I said we can get to market weight by 16 to 20 weeks. So hatching to 10 weeks, they need to be on a chick starter. This is going to be a higher protein, lower energy food that we don't want to have a high energy food because we don't want to force them to grow faster because then that starts causing orthopedic problems, much like we see in some of our dog breeds. So broilers or pullets, broilers are going to be our meat birds. Pullets are our egg birds, and these are 10 to 20 weeks of age. The broilers are slaughtered between 16 and 20 weeks. That's your standard chicken you're going to find in the store. And pullets will start laying 16 to 24 weeks. Now, with that being said, the majority of my birds, I don't think I've ever had a bird start laying at 16 weeks. 20 to 24 weeks, you can't make them lay faster or earlier. When they are sexually mature, then they will start laying. And it just happens whenever. You're going to have some early bloomers, some late bloomers. That's my little chin again with more chicks. And then layer ration. So if you're keeping, obviously you're not going to keep a broiler much past 20 weeks, but if you're keeping dual purpose or layers, then you're going to want to feed a layer ration. These come in pellets and crumbles. I feed my chickens pellets because they make less of a mess than they do with the crumbles. For some reason, my chickens just kind of stick their beak in and just swipe it all over the place and just make a big mess of the crumbles. So I will usually go with the pellets, and that's what they're raised on. That's what they're started on. That's what they're used to. And yes, Purina does make chicken food. So homemade diets. Just like if somebody gave you a bowl of trail mix, the birds will pick out what they like and leave what they don't like. So this may or may not be a complete and balanced diet for them. Now, birds that are allowed to free range will eat plants, insects, amphibians, small mammals, worms, grubs, anything they can get. I have had my chickens kill moles that have gotten in the pen. They usually leave them for me. They don't eat them. But one of the things that we hear is that you're mad as a wet hen, implying that chickens don't like rain. But all the bugs get more active when it's raining, and the worms come out when it's raining. So my chickens typically get very excited when it's raining and don't mind being really wet. And one thing to remember is chickens are omnivores. They are not vegetarians. So if you buy eggs that say they're from vegetarian chickens, is that chicken getting a complete and balanced diet? And my chickens, one of the producers says that they're feeding them marigolds. All that does is make the yolks a pretty color. It doesn't necessarily provide any benefit to the chickens. And I haven't seen where my chickens like the marigolds that I grow in my yard. So one of the harder challenges with chickens is keeping the water fresh and clean, because chickens are messy. They need to have access to clean, fresh water at all times. That's 24/7, 365, with inadequate access. So they either don't have a regular source or it's intermittent. Their egg or meat production will go down. Now, they typically need about 200 mLs or about a cup per bird per day. So I've got 10 birds. So that's 10 cups, 4 cups to a quart. So they need about a gallon a day. And you need to think about something. What are you going to do in the wintertime if you live in an area where the water can freeze? That this is a underwater heater. It works well, but it only works to about this far up. So all of this freezes and may or may not melt in time to provide enough water to the birds. Also, you can see it rusts out fairly quickly because it's galvanized and it's wet. Not the best choice for a lot of options. So this is my current solution to ensuring that my chickens have unfrozen water, and that is the standard crock pot. I have a crock pot in each coop, and on the keep warm setting, it is about 100 to 120 degrees, which the chickens think is just great. Easy access. I do currently have them elevated up on bricks to kind of keep the chickens from kicking things in there, because they'll get in the coop and start kicking things around. We also use pasta strainers to clean out the water once they've kicked straw and feathers in there. So it just makes it a little easier to keep it cleaner longer. Now, when we start handling chickens, which we're vet techs, so that's what we need to think of, we have to remember that chickens have air sacs, not lungs. And if you are constricting their chest for any reason, whether you're restraining them or not, that you can prevent those air sacs from inflating and can very easily kill them. Now, their main defenses are their wings, and a hen flapping her wings at you can be a pretty impressive and scary thing. They have talons. Even the girls have talons on their feet, and their beaks. They will peck at you. And though they won't probably break the skin, it still is very annoying and it can hurt. So these are some newly hatched chicks. They just dried off. And this breed is sex linked. So the boys will have a dark spot on top and the girls won't. So if you are in an area that restricts roosters, getting a sex linked so that you know exactly which sex you have can be very helpful. Also ordering them from a hatchery where you are going to be able to pick either males or females instead of a straight run, which is just whatever they got, which could be all males, could be all females, you never know. That ensuring that all you get is hens can be a bit challenging when you are getting chicks and there is no way to determine if you're getting fertilized eggs, what they're going to come out as. So wings, this is the first thing you want to get control of. You want to place your non-dominant hand. So for me, that's my left hand over their back. So this chicken is doing what's called squatting. And that usually means she's receptive to breeding, but a really friendly chicken. I've got a couple of the birds that do this with us all the time. And it's like, yes, 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 I know. You pat them on her back. And she's like, okay, everything's great. So place your non-dominant hand over their back to secure the wings and then pick them up under the belly. And that will let them know that they're secure. Picking them up by their feet and hanging them upside down is inappropriate and it should not be used on pet birds at any time. Now the talons, roosters are much more equipped with talons than are the hens. The big talons on the inside are what are called spurs. They typically will not squat like a hen. And for me, the easiest way to catch a rooster is to wait until they go to roost at night and it's dark in the coop. And then I use a towel. I throw a towel over them and just scoop them up that way. Roosters don't like being handled for the most part. So it's going to be a challenge any way you do it. So chickens can fly. Even the standard size chickens can fly for short amounts of time. And if they're scared, they can fly even farther. Usually the smaller, younger, and lighter birds, so our bantams, they can fly farther. And it's not uncommon for chickens to roost in low trees. So they will fly up to the tree and roost. You want to always make sure your enclosure is secure. So it's a good idea to have a covering over the top. Before I put the covering on the pen, I used to trim their wings. So I would just trim about 3 to 4 feathers back. And that would make it, they could not get enough lift to get out of the pen. But that's, they replace feathers on a fairly regular basis, and that can get kind of labor intensive. Now, there are veterinarians that will treat chickens. My veterinarian treats chickens. And there may be instances in which they need to get blood from them. They can use the bacillus or saphenous vein, which is in the legs. This is a wing vein in using a butterfly catheter. The amount of blood that we can get from a chicken compared to a similarly sized dog or cat is much smaller. So we have to be very cognizant of how much blood we're removing. Doing fecal exams on chickens is really easy because they always produce a lot. And they do not have a separate bladder, so you will not be able to collect urine. Now, when we start looking at administering medication, there's a couple things that we need to keep in mind. Are you using these birds for meat or eggs? Because that will affect what medications can be used. If we are giving an intramuscular or an IM injection, we're going to use the breast muscle. Sub-Q can be over the back or the breast muscle. And PO or orally is a liquid medication. It is really hard to give a chicken a pill. So usually I'm going to grind it up, mix it with applesauce or yogurt, and we get much better chances of the birds being semi-willing in taking it. You can medicate the water if you need to treat everybody, which is one of the ways that I will do their quarterly wormings. The problem with this is you're not able to determine the individual dose for the birds. So if it's a drug that has a very narrow therapeutic index, where it's very easily, you can underdose or overdose them, this is not the way you want to do it. Everybody gets treated, which if that's what you want, works great. And if they're not drinking, they don't get any medication. So you have to make sure that they're not drinking water elsewhere, that they're only drinking the water that's got the medicine in it. And if it tastes kind of funky, they're not going to drink it. So chickens do get parasites, just like especially any other outdoor animal. They can get lice and mites. So I monitor them for this fairly frequently. They can also get cecal worms, roundworms, capillary worms, tapeworms, flukes, protozoans. Some of these they get from the native birds that are in your area, that when they fly over your yard or they come into your yard, they're leaving poop, and that contaminates the soil and the chickens can get infected. One of our big concerns with the highly pathogenic avian influenza is infection through migrating and visiting wild birds. So lice, the entire lice life cycle is spent on the bird, and the lice is these little black spots on the feathers. Infections are worse in fall and winter because the birds cannot do dust baths, which is one of the things that they do to help keep the lice population down. Plus, I think they just like digging up the yard. You can also treat them with a pesticide spray or dust. You have to be very careful about whether it is safe for the birds. Now, mites, this is an example of scaly leg mites in chickens. I'm happy to say that is not my chicken. They can get red roost mites, northern fowl mites, scaly leg mites. We're going to usually treat these with an insecticidal spray or dust. You have to treat more than just the bird. You're going to have to treat the environment, and that includes the coop. And that is one of the big reasons that I have the plastic coops. If it is made out of wood or brick or cinder blocks, it's very difficult to disinfect the environment. With my plastic coops, I can take everything out, take all the nest box out, spray and disinfect on the entire coop, clean everything before I bring the birds back in. It's labor intensive, but it's pretty easy. So intestinal, we're going to do these, a fecal, just like we would with a dog or a cat. You need to have a cheat sheet to find out what kind of parasites these are. They will still look like parasites. They may not look the same as they do in dogs and cats. And if you're going to treat the birds, it's a good idea to do a fecal so you know what you're treating for. There is no one medication that covers everything. So bumblefoot is usually a staph infection that occurs secondary to trauma that has gotten infected. This can be really difficult for the birds to stand on, can make it difficult for them to roost, and is just uncomfortable. Now, when we start talking about withdrawal time, I've mentioned this a couple times, that if you are growing, if you've got the birds for eggs and or meat production, the medication gets into that meat and or eggs. And there is, for most medications, what's called a withdrawal time, that you are not able to collect eggs or send these animals to market for a period of time. And for most anthelmintics, which is our parasite medications, that can be a 3-month withdrawal time for the eggs. So if you are treating quarterly, then maybe 1 month out of the quarter, you're actually able to use that. So ensuring that your birds do not get infected is easier than trying to treat them. So keeping the coops clean, keeping the exposure to the native wildlife down can always help. Now, when we start talking about drugs, very few drugs are labeled specifically for use in chickens. Drug withdrawal times may preclude your use at all. So there may be a withdrawal time that is 6 months, 9 months, that would not be economically feasible for you to actually treat that animal. To find out what the withdrawal times are on drugs, we would go to a site called AMDUCA, the Animal Medicinal Drug Use Clarification Act, that does require a valid veterinary client-patient relationship. So an owner can't go and try to get these medications. You can't use a medication to increase production. So hormones, antibiotics, things along that line that have been shown to increase production are illegal. And they are prohibited as a food additive. One of the ways that we've seen this lately is a product called a coccidiostat that is included in chick feed that baby chickens are very susceptible to coccidiosis, or infection with the protozoan Coccidia. And a lot of chick feeds will have coccidiostats in them. And it is getting harder and harder now to find chick feeds with coccidiostats because of the drug withdrawal times. So what drugs are safe? Okay, so you've decided you need to use a drug. The veterinarians checked AMDUCA. We still have to go to the food animal residue avoidance data bank, or FARAD, to check to see if this is safe to be used. That will help determine the withdrawal times and the safety. Not all drugs can be used on all species. There are different pathophysiologic pathways in the individual animals that can affect how safe this medication or effective it's going to be for that species. So we have entire classes on pharmaceuticals and what you can use in what animals. So biosecurity, one of the big problems we're having currently is highly pathogenic avian influenza. I am on the listserv for Michigan, and they just issued today, there's another 2 farms in one of our counties that has come up positive for highly pathogenic avian influenza. There is no treatment for this. The only thing that the farmers can do is called all out, and that is where every bird is slaughtered. They are disposed of. They cannot be processed. Everything's got to be disinfected, and then they have to reintroduce new birds. The best way to introduce new birds is to get chicks. We've said it takes 20 to 24 weeks. So once a farm has had to destroy all their birds, it's another 6 months before they'll be producing any eggs. And when chickens first start laying eggs, it's kind of hit and miss. They do not get into this 5 to 6 eggs a week business. It takes them a while to settle into that. So avian influenza is a big biosecurity. If you have pet chickens, I would advise you to never, ever go to a commercial farm. That you can bring it home on your boots, on your clothes, you can bring it home on your car tires. It is definitely not worth whatever information you're going to find out at a commercial hatchery. Psittacosis is a lung infection that can be transmitted from birds to people. And salmonella is a bacteria that is a normal enteric or intestinal bacteria in chickens. You cannot get a salmonella-free chicken. Most meat and eggs that get contaminated with salmonella has to do with processing, not necessarily the birds. Safety precautions: obtain birds from a secure hatchery, those that follow the National Poultry Improvement Plan. Marek's disease is a highly pathogenic, very deadly disease for chickens. They should be, if you're getting it from a hatchery, ask that they be vaccinated. It costs like $1. Restrict access to coop, birds, and equipment. The coop tours that a lot of places have, where people are going into 10, 15 different coops every day. I would never, ever invite that many people over to see my birds or contaminate my environment. Husbandry precautions. The recommendation is what's called all in, all out. You bring in a bunch of chicks, you raise them up, and then when they die or they get slaughtered, you disinfect, you bring them in. The recommendation is no intermixing of ages, which means you can't bring in a new adult bird that needs to be rehomed, or you can't get just a couple chicks. That is unfortunately not what I do. I do intermix the ages. I will rehome birds. Most of my roosters have been rehomed. Where somebody is in an area where they cannot have roosters, I can have them. So that's how I get most of my roosters. And the recommendation is that all new birds be quarantined for a 30-day minimum. Whether you have a setup to allow this can be a little iffy. No sick, injured, neglected, or abandoned birds. I'm a technician. Those are the kind that I get. So we have to be very careful that nobody's bringing in anything that's going to contaminate the rest of my coop. Disinfection. You can use bleach or chlorhexidine. I'm asthmatic, so I prefer chlorhexidine if I'm cleaning coops or cleaning anything else. You want to disinfect your clothes, your shoes, your car tire, any equipment that may have been used and transferred to another site. So this is, you've seen Mommy Bird a couple times. These chicks, not hers, but she's raising them, and they're almost as big as she is, and she's trying to spread her wings out and cover everybody up. So chances are good that there are backyard chickens in your area. They may be in your backyard. These are pets, and owners expect them to be treated as such. Basic, easy handling techniques are required. There shouldn't be any muscling going on with these guys. Chickens can be pretty fragile, and we don't want to break anybody's pet. So this is pretty representative of my current flock right now, that I've got guinea hens and I've got chickens. Everybody is standard sized. That this is one of my Americanas, so she lays blue eggs. This is a Buff Orpington. She lays tan eggs. I don't have any white egg layers right now. The guinea hens do lay eggs. They tend to be more seasonal, and the shells are extremely tough. You have to crack them with a knife compared to what we get with the chickens. So we've got a couple minutes for questions, if there are any.
So there is one so far, and if you guys do have any questions, please feel free to type them in the Q&A box. So we have a question. I have a chicken with sour crop. We tried massaging the crop, separating her from the others, keeping the food and water away from her for 12 hours. Is there anything that we're missing? The rest of our chickens are fine. We noticed that she threw up a piece of hay. Their diet's wonderful. They're pets, so they eat a very balanced, well-balanced chicken diet.
I would probably recommend that you actually, if she's not responding to at-home care, then I would recommend taking her in to see the veterinarian. They may be able to clean out the crop or see if there's anything else going on that is causing a secondary problem. So I think if you've already done these typical at-home measures and she's still not doing well, then you need to go see the veterinarian.
Another question is, thanks for the webinar. Do you recommend keeping roosters with hens? And if so, is there a recommended rooster to hen ratio?
There's a recommended rooster to rooster ratios. Roosters don't share well. So it doesn't matter how many hens you have. You can typically only have one rooster in a specific area without a fence between them. That I don't think, yeah, if you have more than one rooster, you're going to have a problem no matter how many hens you have. And there are any number of reasons why you can have roosters. Protection is one of the big ones. My last rooster was a silky, and he was dumb as a box of rocks. The girls wanted nothing to do with him, and he was the most worthless example of a protection rooster you could ever see. So not all roosters are the same. And I have never had a hen try to attack me. I have had my roosters on a fairly regular basis try to attack me. And we have the 2 strikes out. You go for Ann twice, I am not going to be threatened by a bird in my yard. So you go after me twice, that's it, you're done. And you're going to be removed from the flock and removed from the coop. So maybe a little harsh, but I'm not going to have people running through my yard getting chased by a rooster. And I have small grandchildren, so not a safe option to have a rooster that's going to be bad. And not all of them are. Some of them can be very good. My bestest little rooster was a little game rooster. And he was just the bestest little thing you could ever want.
One last question. She's heard mixed things about washing eggs before you eat them, as well as letting them sit out on the counter unrefrigerated for several weeks and they're still safe to eat. What are your recommendations?
Well, that's the European model versus the US model. The US model requires that commercially sold eggs be washed and bleached. Chickens, when they lay eggs, have a waxy coating on the eggs called bloom, and that prevents bacteria from getting inside. If the bloom is left intact, they can be kept out on the counter and used as you need them. I do not wash my eggs, but I do keep them in the fridge. Whether I don't like a bunch of stuff on my counter, so that's one of my big reasons. I don't wash my eggs. If I have an egg that is really dirty, one, I don't give it to my friends. Those are eggs that we're typically going to use. And I may scrub it off with a scrubber, but I'm not going to soak them in soap and water. And that is to maintain the bloom on the outside of the eggs, and that helps maintain their freshness.
Awesome. And that is it for the questions. Thank you, Anne. That was amazing.
And now you want chickens, right?
Everybody wants chickens.
There's
Thank
no,
you guys
get 'em.
so much for joining us this afternoon, or I guess it's still the morning, for joining us this morning. We so appreciate you guys supporting the program and coming to our speaker series.